Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs and to another episode of Blockbuster. It is that time of the month. We have John Rogers back on the show to talk about the latest and greatest when it comes to news out of Hollywood and when it comes to Hollywood blockchain news, let's call it. This is an awesome episode. This is going to be, I think, the first in maybe like a 3-part little series where we start to get in the weeds, and really John gets in the weeds as to how he sees blockchain and NFTs being leveraged at different parts of the value chain, at different parts of the stack for movie and TV production, let's call it. And this is something we've wanted to do for a while. So this is kind of part one of that. We also get into some of the latest news that he's excited about. We lay it out a little bit at the top of this episode together, so I won't spoil too much right here in my intro. But another great episode. So grateful to John for coming on and sharing all his wisdom with us. A couple notes. My camera kept cutting out during this episode, so if you're watching on YouTube, I'm sorry about that. I teased this a little bit last week. Like last week, I was just having an issue with my camera where things were cutting out. And so, yeah, if you're inclined to play an overpriced JPEGs drinking game and you want to take a shot every time my camera goes out, this is a great episode to play that game on. I think we've fixed the issue with my camera for moving forward, so we won't keep having this issue, but I can't guarantee it. I'm not the camera whisperer just yet. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, please ignore my appearance right now. A, I just look a little bit run down, but B, I am wrapped in a blanket because my apartment is freezing and they turned off the heat for the season. And now I have to sit around in a blanket because it got kind of cold in New York after randomly being hot, and then they turned off the heat, and now, anyways, this is the life I lead. Okay, that aside, a couple other admin-y notes. If you are listening to this on Wednesday, which is when this episode drops, in 2 days, we will be having I will be sitting down with Daniel Allegre, our second OPJ tour stop in Austin, Texas, at Consensus, sitting down with Daniel Allegre for a fireside chat about all things Yuga. If you're an OPJ holder, a Yuga asset holder, you can reserve seats at opjtour.com. That event is happening this Friday, 6 p.m. You can find all the details on that website. We are also getting close to opening up tickets for our LA event, which is going to be with Kevin Rose, Frankie Gods. That'll be an awesome conversation. Really excited to chat with the two of them together. That is going to be in LA. That is going to be LA, May 16th. I'm pausing only because there's a couple of complications that we have to work through, but we're going to work through them. So we're going to say it's going to be on May 16th. I'm trying to work through some equipment challenges right now in terms of getting the thing recorded so that folks who can't attend can still watch and hear it, and we're just dealing with some challenges on that. But anyway, we're going to solve that within the next week, and probably a week from now or so we will go live with tickets. If you are in LA on May 16th, you can come and you have an OPJ NFT. You can come hang out with Kevin, Frank, and me. Going to be a great event. Okay, I think those are the announcements. The last thing, obviously, is we need to hear a word from our lovely sponsors. And I do just want to say we have one really new sponsor on, which is GALXE. You'll hear from them in just a moment. And then I never really formally introduced Web3 Sense, which is a sponsor who came on, I guess, a couple months ago at this point. Just flagging that, it feels cliche to be like, thank you to the sponsors who make this show possible. But thank you so much to the sponsors who make this show possible. We are an ad-supported business at Overpriced JPEGs, and the folks who make this possible really are you guys, the listeners. But it's also the advertisers who pay and who allow me to keep my freezing home, the lights on at least in my freezing home, if not the heat. So really, I'm grateful for these folks. Give them a chance, check them out. We've got links in the show notes for all of our sponsors right now. It's OpenSea, Web3 Sense, GALXE. And obviously that there's a rotating cast of advertisers that we have, but grateful for them right now. Okay, I think with that, we'll throw it over to them, and then we'll be on to the episode with John Rogers for Blockbuster.
Y'all know I think one of the most powerful use cases for NFTs are loyalty programs, which is why I'm so excited about our latest partner, GALXE. That's GALXE. GALXE is a leading platform for building a Web3 community. It is a no-code, plug-and-play solution to create task-based campaigns and loyalty programs. With over 67 million users, GALXE has worked with folks like Optimism, Polygon, Arbitrum, and more than 2,100 other partners with reward-based loyalty programs of their own. And I'm especially excited to announce their latest product offering, GALXE Mintlist. Mintlist enables NFT projects to issue allow lists based on different user profiles. It's free to use, and projects can then take advantage of GALXE's other offerings, like Task and Quest, which incentivize audience growth and user retention in the long term. Go beyond the mint and keep using GALXE's infrastructure to reward users through on and off-chain actions. GALXE's goal is to help projects grow in an authentic way and help them retain their users and communities over the long haul. And as a user, you can start contributing to your favorite Web3 communities today, joining Allow List through Mintlist and earning rewards, NFTs, oats, tokens, and points. Go to galaxy.com right now, that's GALXE.com right now, or click the link in the show notes to get started. Your Web3 community is waiting. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OpenSea, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OpenSea user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copy mint protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OpenSea, you use OpenSea, but did you know that OpenSea now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OpenSea. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OpenSea right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. John, welcome back. Welcome back to Overpriced JPEGs, but really welcome back to, our blockbuster here.
And now, on with the show.
I never know the word, segment isn't the right term. Franchise, I suppose.
Recurring episode. I don't know, but GM and
franchise.
Yeah. Episode 4, kind of.
3, 4?
Technically 3,
oh, that's
but
right.
We had an emergency episode
when Disney backed out. That got some mainstream pickup. I don't know if you saw this, like Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway on Pivot talked about the fact that like Disney had exited the metaverse. I'm pretty sure it was like one of the titles. It was like part of the title of one of their episodes. And I'm like, these people who just, love dancing on the grave of the metaverse.
Yeah, I did see that. And sadly, Disney leaned into it a little bit the way they did the announcement. I get it was part of a bigger process, but cutting the entire team at once just brought a lot of attention to it. And people wanted to read into, metaverse is dead. And this is proof. And no, it's not. And in fact, we'll talk about next generation storytelling here in a minute. Kind of leaning into our agenda a little bit.
I think what we want to do with this episode is something that I believe you had teased in episode 1, which is you have really interesting ideas about how blockchain can impact every layer of the value chain in Hollywood production or in kind of storytelling. Mm-hmm. And so those buckets are really development up there at the front. You've got production itself, and then you have the third bucket, which is distribution. So at the top here, I think we'll talk a little bit about all 3 and really anchor ourselves in some recent news bits that we'll talk about. And then we'll go deeper on that first bucket, development, with an eye towards in future episodes going deeper on what does it look like in production and then what does it look like in distribution. So that's the plan today.
Sounds good to me.
Let's dive in. These 3 buckets, the stories. The first, this development bucket, which again, we're gonna dive deeper onto exactly what this looks like in a bit. There's this news that Superplastic and Amazon have inked a deal. I know you were saying you felt like this didn't get as much pickup as you would have maybe expected. Could you run us through what this news item is and why you think it's interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. So this news it's a couple weeks old at this point, but when I look at these kind of news stories, I'm looking for mega trends. Like, what are the small little bits of information that we can find today that add up over time to being a mega trend? And one of the areas I'm looking for news articles about and information about is within this development bucket are a couple of things about Web3 projects getting studio deals. So not really focused so much on the agency deals, like someone signs with CAA, but more like someone signs with an Amazon or someone signs with a Lionsgate or a Disney.
Why is that more interesting than like an agent signing?
Because the job of an agent is to find deals and to get those business relationships in place. But once you have a deal with a Disney, then there's actually people working on an idea. Some fast, some slow, but there's actually people working to make that idea a real product, a real show or other offering. And so I've been looking for this news item specifically because I think it's going to be something we're going to see in the next 2 years a lot more of, which is a Web3 project or studio signing a first look arrangement with one of the major media companies. And what that means is if I was that studio and I have an idea for characters or for a story or for IP, that studio that's giving me some money every month to help with my overhead gets the first chance to look at it and to pick up the project. It doesn't mean they're guaranteed that project. In most cases, it means that they get the first look, the first right of refusal. And if they choose not to pick it up, I can take it across the street, let's just say to Netflix. And if Netflix likes it, then they have to pay my first look partner some overhead to compensate them for that. And then it's a Netflix project. And so my hypothesis is going to be that we're going to see these kinds of deals announced. And as far as I can remember right now or think of, this is the first one. So it's kind of like the first beginning of a sign that my hypothesis is gonna start to play out. And
so tell us more about this specific deal, Superplastic. I didn't know they were Vermont based. Tell folks a little bit about Superplastic and then what this deal is.
Yeah. So it comes from an experienced team, coming more from the character brand side. I forget the names of the founders, but they were part of a long line of succession. I think Kid Robot was their previous company of kind of vinyl collectible toys. So this is more in the David Horvath school of building character brands. Mm-hmm. And so they've developed their first 2 characters. And the deal is basically first, and there's several steps to this. The first step is Amazon is going to develop a TV show or streaming show around these 2 characters. So they have a great kind of 3D modeled look to them. And so this will be a show built around those characters.
And these characters that you're describing, these kind of vinyl 3D looking things, it's Googimon and Janky, I believe.
I think they just flipped that. I think it's Janky and Googimon.
Janky and Googimon is the name. I had read it as like 2 different projects. Okay, Janky and Googimon is the name of this IP.
Exactly.
And within that are these characters. And these are NFTs because Superplastic is a company that exists outside of the Web3 world. This is not like a Web3 native started thing.
Correct. They're straddling over digital and physical in that there's actually physical goods. Like I'm sure there's vinyl collectibles of them. I know there's some fashion, some like cool t-shirts and cool streetwear. But then there's also the digital component. So they're straddling this world of physical and digital. So this first part of the deal is for that streaming show to be developed. And that'll take a lot of time. It could be years before that comes out and gets seen. The development process is a long, difficult process. We'll talk about that later. The second element to this is the first look arrangement. So if Superplastic develops additional characters, additional IP, Amazon has the first look, the first rights to see that and to say, hey, we would love to acquire the rights to be a show. If Amazon passes, then they're free to take it anywhere else that they would like.
So this first look covers anything Superplastic does. This is not like first look deals are like company to company, not company to project. It's not like this is a first look deal for this particular IP. It's across what Superplastic develops.
It can be variable, but to keep it simple for our discussion purposes, yes. So any new IP that Superplastic develops, Amazon gets the first look at it to say we want to develop something based on that.
That's interesting. And you're is this in your head? You're kind of considering this like the first deal of this kind that you've seen that involves NFTs. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. And so I have met with not every one of the studios in Hollywood, but just about every one of them. And what I've told their development people, what I've told their studio leadership is you need to look for these kinds of partnerships. You either need to develop this capability in-house or look for these kinds of first look partnerships. And this is the first one that has actually happened. So it's exciting for me to see like this begin to happen.
And why do you think they should be looking for these kinds of partnerships or this kind of deal, this first look kind of deal? Because I've heard you've talked to me about this before too.
It comes to the nature of the development process and how IP gets translated from a source and an origin to eventually become a film or television show. And things have changed in the development world in the last couple of years. Budgets have gotten tighter. My explanation is that's traditionally a very slow, laborious, expensive process. A great example recently, and I posted this on Twitter, is Disney recently released a trailer for the Haunted Mansion movie, coming, I think, later this summer. I worked on that project 12 years ago, and I worked on that project for several years before I left Disney, as far back as 12 years ago, and it's just now coming to market. Back then, Guillermo del Toro was directing. They had different cast. It changed probably 20 different times over the years, but that's called development hell. That's how long it takes to get and that's in a known IP, right? That's from a theme park attraction. It took that long to get the idea and the script right and get it produced and distributed. And that's just not going to work in the future. How many millions of dollars were spent just to get it to the point to say, we can go make this now. And no one can really afford to spend those kinds of monies in development anymore. And so my theory is that the development process, it's not going to be killed off or destroyed by Web3. I'm never going to claim that. But it can be augmented with new tools that are Web3 powered, or find alternative paths for development and acquiring IP through Web3.
Yeah, so that starts to get us into what we're going to dive into in a deeper way for the second half of this episode. But wrapping up this news portion, so we have this deal between Superplastic and Amazon. It's the kind of first look deal that you've been thinking companies should be going for a variety of reasons, and have been advising studios to look for these first look deals. But there's another component of this particular piece of news between Superplastic and Amazon, which has to do with like a fundraise component to all of this. Walk us through that.
Yep. So Amazon's fund, which I think is called the Alexa Fund, is providing a $20 million Series A4. I've never heard an A4 venture raise before, but they're providing a $20 million Series A to Superplastic. So this deal is remarkable for three purposes. One, the first look deal that I'm aware of. Two, the show of the Genki and Gugamon show going into development, and three, $20 million investment from Amazon into Superplastic. So definitely a deep tie-up between the two companies. Great pedigree on the Superplastic team. So this will be something that deserved a lot more attention when it was announced, and be something I'm looking at closely going into the future.
Do you have any idea how these NFTs have done? I want to look this up. I realize I should have looked this up before.
The thing about Superplastic is they're more of a physical goods company that's dabbled in Web3 than a true Web3 studio team.
Okay, so I've got these pulled up. It's a little bit hard, like I find this is not all together uncommon with brands that are not NFT first, let's say, like Superplastic is, as we said, it's a Web 2 brand that has existed outside of NFTs, but has now done things with NFTs. So I find those kinds of companies often, it's a little bit hard to dig and figure out exactly what they're doing. I am on their OpenSea page. They've got this really cool flowery background. There's almost something like Murakami-esque about the background.
Yeah, and I think the way they're using these is as like a loyalty or access token. So it's hold an NFT and you get a first look or first right to purchase a collectible, like a physical collectible. So they may have been a little ahead of their time in that regard, because I think that's an area that's getting a lot more attention kind of going forward is, hey, if I hold this collectible, can I have access as a proof of loyalty to a special event or to a special item?
Yeah, and looking here, so they've been kind of building out the story, it appears. So it says Genki and Gugamon, it says episode 1, and this is July 13th, 2021. Genki and Gugamon broke into Christie's New York City, NYC, and stole 22 hyper-valuable NFTs from the venerable auction house. Unfortunately, they accidentally blew up the building and destroyed the NFTs while escaping the cops. In July 2021, the pair dropped 9,240 unique Crypto Genki NFTs generated out of the broken originals. So they've been doing creative things in terms of the storytelling and the integration of the NFTs with this. But that gives you context into the NFTs themselves. And now they have this first look deal. So they have been doing NFTs specifically with Genki and Gugamon, and now they have this first look deal with Amazon that has this fundraising component that's pretty sizable and is exciting in terms of what might be the future of this stuff more often.
Exactly. I think it's an exciting project to watch, and it has my attention.
Love it. Okay. Going into news item number 2, which is in our production bucket, is one that folks probably have heard of, maybe more so than they will have heard of the Genki and Gugumon one, which is Momoguru, which was a pretty popular NFT drop that happened, I don't know, a month and a half ago now?
About a month ago.
And, definitely hit and had some pop when it first launched. I think it's definitely cooled subsequently. But it's from the Baobab
I say Baobab Studios. I think named after the Baobab tree, but don't quote me on that.
Well, that sounds right. If there's a word that means something, I would go with that. So Baobab Studios, who are quite known. I mean, there's a bunch of like ex-Pixar folks. Am I right?
Ed Catmull and Alvy Ray Smith are two of the not founders, but part of the board team on that project. Ed Catmull is famous for, after the Disney Pixar acquisition, became the head of all Disney animation for a number of years, basically until he retired just a few years ago. So, founder of Pixar, head of Disney Animation, having him on your board, big, heavy firepower there. Especially Ed comes from the technical side. He was one of the early pioneers in computer animation technology. He's very much a technologist. Tremendous background to have him on board. And then Kevin Lin, the co-founder of Twitch, is also on that board. So why this is, besides the news itself and in the project, why this has my attention is I have a theory or hypothesis that when it comes to production and creating of IP, we are beginning to see, and will see increasingly more so, of high profile Hollywood talent come onto projects. That the space, despite the current bear market, the space is gaining legitimacy. There's a lot of creative talent out in the world who are frustrated with the current state of Hollywood, and that they're now particularly high level talent because either financially or in their careers they're established and can take a chance. And so I'm aware of multiple projects that are still in stealth mode that have hired huge name writers and artists from Hollywood that are currently working quietly. Certainly we had some news last week on the project I've been working on at Feature in that regard, which you can talk about in a second. So I believe that this is another sign of that onboarding of huge creative talent.
And so explain to me maybe when you say production, then in this bucket 2 production, like how does Baobab and or Momoguru kind of fit in that category to you?
So this is, these buckets, the 3 buckets, development, production, and distribution, are pretty gross buckets. Like there's a lot of different steps of the value chain that fall under each one. But how this one falls under production specifically is about the talent, about the creative storytellers, artists that you need to create IP, and coming together and actually working on new IP. And so it's essentially a sign of established pedigreed storytellers saying, we're going to do our next project in Web3, and we see an application to take that from Web3 to more traditional media later on down the road. So it's very much in the creation side of storytelling.
So one of the things you're watching is, and we were talking about this before the show started, I mean, and I know you just said this, right, is like, who are the talent that are coming from the production world in traditional Hollywood who are now entering NFTs? And I know you've got a bunch of other examples beyond even just this Baobab Studios, which of course is a cool one. Next Blockbuster episode will probably be more about production, so we can dive in deeper about Momoguru for folks who are a fan of that project. Maybe there's folks who are listening who own that project. So we can definitely go a little deeper there next time. Yep. Let's go to our third category, though, which is distribution. And the piece of distribution news here, folks will definitely know, is Pudgy Penguins and their deal with Retail Monster, which we talked about a little bit. We definitely circled it. I don't know. I can't remember how much we talked about the Retail Monster deal specifically when Luca was on the show recently. But we obviously talked quite a bit about licensing and products and what they're thinking around that. So say a little bit here about Pudgy Penguins, Retail Monster, and this third bucket, distribution.
Yeah. So for this bucket, distribution is more than just getting a piece of content or story or a piece of art out to people's out through to experience storytelling. I'm also categorizing all of the other aspects of that. This is really like where franchises are born, which is it's not just a story. It's also a toy line. It's also a video game. It's also brand partnerships. It's also derivative storytelling. And so in this case, this is more specific to the licensing world. And by licensing, I mean, think University of Michigan sweatshirts that you could buy at a store, or Disney Star Wars t-shirts that you would buy at a Target. And so in this case, Retail Monster is a licensing agent So they represent brands. They get hired by brands big and small to say, we don't have the resources or the capability to go out and do licensing deals and to do retail deals. So we will pay you a share of our revenue from the projects or a flat fee to go out and represent us. You're our agent. And so just like some people have a Hollywood agent around getting movie deals, some people have retail licensing agents to get product manufacturing retail deals. And that's what Pudgy Penguins has done here. Retail Monsters, very credible, all ex-Disney people, in fact, very senior Disney people. I worked with all of them. So it's essentially Disney's consumer products team from the early 2000s who left to start their own company. And so this is a top tier team that they've hired with Pudgy's. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do.
You think that too often in NFT worlds, like one of the mistakes that get made, I think on both sides, like both from Web3 native projects and then certainly on the side of like the Hollywood or like the trad people, is to see NFTs as only this, right? Like you've talked about thinking Hollywood treats NFTs like they are just another merch line, and they don't understand the full potential of them. Really, in the context of what we're talking about today, like they don't seem to see the potential of them in production and development in the way that you think they should. They don't take a holistic enough approach. And then on the flip side, I think you feel like Web3 companies are maybe too quick or too eager to like jump into a merch deal because they see dollar signs. But in the vein of David Horvath, like they're also maybe taking the quick buck and sacrificing a bigger picture vision for their own project. What do you think of this Pudgy's deal? Well, I guess first, did you listen to my conversation with Luca Nets? I did. So what do you think of Pudgy's deal with Retail Monster?
I like it. It's definitely maybe a little premature, but it's given where Pudgy's is going. Pudgy's is not the David Horvath long-term, decades-long building of a character IP. They're going more of the route of shorter term. By short term, I mean about a decade of how do we develop this IP and get the most attention and traction with it. So I'm fine with that. Where my criticism is around licensing is when studios license an IP. I'll just say Mickey Mouse, using one of our prior examples. When they license the character and it's just to sell a good and not extend storytelling, I feel like they're missing that opportunity. And so the question for Pudgy's I would ask is, how are you extending the storytelling with this deal with Retail Monster through the products? Is there a companion piece of content or material? If there's just no other companion storytelling to support it and go with it, and it's just put some cute characters on a t-shirt, it's probably going to miss a little bit. I would love to see some other companion storytelling to support it.
What I hear from Pudgy's is twofold. A, we bought this brand for $2.5 million and we need to make money, right? We need to have income before we can really do anything else. And so there was that component of an honesty that's like, yeah, you know what? We needed revenue in the door and this was a way to do it. It also, there has this like give back to the community tie-in because you can license your Pudgy for these deals or whatever, right? And so there's that. The second piece is it's right smack dab in the heart of Luca's wheelhouse as a founder is I know how to use social media to market consumer goods products that are going to be found in Target or Walmart or Macy's or whatever. And that when I asked him about the storytelling component, it sounds to me like he fully understands that has to be a companion to all of this if this is going to last, that, he can make it 6, 12, 18 months on the back of his own kind of social media prowess, but that to make this thing last, he needs the stories, and that he knows that's not his core competency. And I really respected his sort of, maybe I was reading between lines, but I think he was pretty just candid about that. Yeah. And so he's like, we're talking to a lot of different storytellers to bring somebody in to make sure we build out that side because we know it's critical to it. So I think it's interesting.
I'll compare that to the Akutars project where they brought in some ex-Lucasfilm colleagues of mine to really focus on the storytelling. Now, they've been working in quiet. I'm curious to see what they've been up to for the last 9 months. I know they've got something exciting that's probably
brewing. They have something coming out, I believe, in September. I don't think they've publicly said it. I mean, it's not. I don't want to tease something. It's not crazy. It's not like it's a movie announcement, right? But I am just consistently, whenever I talk to Micah, impressed by how they're thinking about things. And it's sort of a pattern for me where I do think a lot of time the projects that are quieter, in some ways, are often being more strategic, like, anyways, I don't want to say more because I don't know what he's publicly said yet, but we'll probably have him on in this fall to talk about some of what they're doing.
What's interesting about that is with Akutars is they've been quiet, but no one is out screaming bloody murder as to what's happening. Compare that to what was happening with Doodles, and I think there's a lesson there to kind of really be analyzed in the future as to like how has Akutar project engaged their community to keep them happy and satiated with information, but have the freedom to work in private. And so I think there's something interesting there.
Yeah, I think some people have been frustrated. You know, I do think the hack that they had, or not the hack, sorry, that's not the right term. When the mistake in the smart contract that locked up the 27 million did take some wind out of some sales. So I do think there's people who support Akutars that would love to see it get more attention. But I also think the people who bought in from day one were bought into the bigger vision, and it just attracted a good group. And a lot of that does kind of come from the top, you know? I mean, not to say that like these projects that get a lot of FUD from the community, like, you know, deserve it because there's something wrong with the top. But I do think that Micah, even when that smart contract mistake happened, there was a lot of outpouring of support and like heartache for him as opposed to like anger towards him. Though I do think it a little bit took some wind out of the sails. Oh my goodness, my camera went out again. We're just gonna live with this, folks. Sorry, this is gonna be a wild ride on the YouTube side. Okay, so last piece of news. Oh, go finish your thought, and then I have one more piece of news. We want to talk about Lollipop before we get into deeper dive on the development side.
So I was just going to go close full circle about the news about Pudgy penguins and retail monsters, which I'm bullish on it. I get that it's in a slightly different path than maybe I usually talk about as like bullish and bearish, but I'm positive on it. I think if they can get the storytelling component that supports that going behind the scenes, then that'll be that much better.
Okay, last piece of news that I want to talk about, and again, I apologize that y'all can't see me on the camera feed, but this has been like the 6th time it's done it, and I'm sick of trying to fix it, so it's just going to be in and out all day, is a project that you're very directly connected with, John, and you and I have talked about this a lot, and I don't know what's public yet, so I want to be very careful about letting you lead this conversation, because I don't want to say anything that is not yet public. Yep. Lollipop, correct me if I'm wrong, that's just that's like the internal name for it, right? Like this doesn't have actually anything to do with Lollipops.
Nope, that's now the go-to-market branding. We had a project code name, but that was shed. We came out of stealth mode about April 9th, so about a week ago, with the first press release. At the time this episode we're recording right now gets broadcast, the second press release will have come out. But Lollipop or Lollipop Racing is the go-to-market branding.
Oh, yikes. See, shows that I messed that up. Because I know so much about the project and Lollipop, I didn't see how Lollipop fit for it. So every time you said Lollipop to me, I've assumed it was like a code name. So, okay, tell folks what we can publicly tell them about Lollipop Racing. And this is a project you're heavily a part of as part of Feature, who we've talked about on this show before. Yep,
that's right. So this is a project I've put about 50% of my time for the last years into this one project. Like I said, we just came out of stealth mode with the first press release. And what that first press release was basically announcing, hey, we're here, that the brand name is Lollipop. And for anyone who's wondering, well, what the hell is a lollipop? This ties into the world of professional auto racing. And in auto racing, you'll see men and women on the side of the tracks with a stick. And it has like a sign at the end of it. It looks like a lollipop. And they call them the lollipop men and the lollipop women. And so this is a direct tie to the world of auto racing. Now, we went through a branding process with an outside vendor agency partner to kind of identify the branding. The name was developed by someone in-house at Feature, and we just kind of kept coming back to like it's an odd but oddly compelling name. And ultimately, our filmmaker, our showrunner, was like, I kind of like that, and was the support of it. And that was the one of the other elements of this announcement, which is that our showrunner is David Ayer, the creator of the Fast and the Furious. And the goal is, he created the greatest racing franchise in history to date, and that was Fast and the Furious, built around street racing. And the next new racing franchise, Lollipop, will be built around circuit track racing. And so it's one of the announcements is that this will be 10 episodes across 10 races in 10 cities with one story, fictional story that crosses across all 10 of these episodes. And we're hoping to create the next great racing franchise with that.
Very cool. And so I think I can say this, and we'll cut it if I can't, right? You last episode, our big Disney breakdown that we did, I guess last month, you commented that in the press release about Disney shutting down its metaverse program, they were like, next gen storytelling is a decade away. And you were like, that's not true. It's like a year away, not even. It's like months away, right?
Yeah.
And I know that part of that was in reference to this project, because you guys are really trying to push things forward when it comes to this idea of next-gen storytelling.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can speak to around what those elements look like as part of this franchise?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with the time that Disney made that announcement, we were deep in the authoring the press release for the first press release about the project. And so I was literally like reading a press release and commenting on, marking it up while Disney made that announcement. It's like, no, next gen storytelling isn't that far away. It's next. And this idea of next gen storytelling. So what is that? Well, it's not how Disney was approaching it, which was really a bit more of like a metaverse game. The idea is very simple, and it's been around for much longer than Web3 has been, which is how do you take entertainment, which is inherently a passive experience. You're sitting on a couch to watch a show. You're sitting in a theater to watch a movie. And how can you make that experience interactive? How can you build in capabilities to let the audience participate in the storytelling in some ways? And using Web3 technologies in a partnership with Polygon, that was also one of the announcements, with Polygon as our tech partner, we are going to build this new streaming series as next-gen storytelling. It'll be the first Hollywood next-gen storytelling experience where the audience actually gets to participate in the show, and it will actually be, the audience participation will be broadcast if they choose. So to be clear, if you just want to watch a show, an amazing piece of pop culture entertainment, David Ayer storytelling, sit on the couch, grab some popcorn, enjoy episode 1. If you want to participate, you have the option to go participate and become a part of this. Now, when you think of the potential viewership of a streaming series, we see this as a potential mass onboarding event for new wallets coming into the Polygon ecosystem. So what I would hope is, and what we really want to engage more Web3 projects as we start kind of ramping up more and more over the summer, is how can we leverage this as a mass onboarding event to get eyeballs, to get people excited about Web3. Now, we're never going to say NFTs. We're never going to say metaverse. It's digital collectibles. It's storytelling. The audience, frankly, doesn't even need to know. Just if the tech works, all they need to know is that there's this other element they can participate in.
We'll definitely do more episodes where we talk about this and like what are the, get a little bit more into the technicals and like what are the wallet specifications here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What is the expected timeline of like delivery? Like when does this thing go live and can be watched?
I don't think we've announced yet our we'll call it our broadcast date, our first date. What's going to happen through the summer is we're going to make more press release announcements as information comes on. We want to kind of ease people into what this is because there's a lot of elements to it. One other piece of news that we announced possibly today at the broadcast of this episode is that Jerome Chen will be our visual effects supervisor. If you don't know who Jerome Chen is, he's an Academy Award nominated visual effects supervisor, did Jumanji, Men in Black, Suicide Squad. So we have an Academy Award winning type or nominated pedigree coming on for visual effects. There'll be more exciting news there over the summer. The first big activation, I don't have a date to give you, but I do have some alpha to share.
Okay. We love alpha.
Anyone who wants to learn more and wants to get in early should go to lollipop.racing. The website is lollipop.racing. And you can sign up and buy a physical lollipop. And it's quote unquote your key to the race. I would suggest you buy a lollipop.
Not financial advice.
Not financial advice, but it is for people who like getting in things early, like getting special access. And it's a real physical lollipop that you can eat.
Wait.
Oh yeah, what you're getting is, and it costs like $10, but you're getting a physical lollipop that will be sent to you in the mail with a QR code that opens up other opportunities.
Oh, interesting.
I don't want to say anything more than that.
Okay.
But get your
and
lollipop.
It's like $10 to buy this thing. This is not like an NFT that's like half an ETH.
No, it's just a lollipop. And $10 is expensive for a lollipop, but there's shipping and they're being handmade in LA by like some little mom and pop confectionery.
Oh, and well, the real point of it too is to get this QR code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
I'm really excited. I mean, I'm so rooting for y'all to succeed. Just to reiterate, the whole idea is how do we make content more interactive? And you're not just sitting on the couch passively, which of course you said. And this was something I talked about a lot. I feel like last year at various points, I haven't said it as much now, but I do think what feels like such a no-brainer to me about this is the human psychology element of it, which is we live in this world where we're just constantly trying to up the ante from in a content sense. And you see that in terms of content has gotten more violent, it's gotten more sexualized, it's gotten more all these things because we need more to keep our attention. And when I think about the rise of sports betting as that became legalized, like people want to have more skin in the game around things. And this just feels like a natural progression of what is a very natural human tendency to want the stakes to go up and up and up. So this to circle back, like I'm so rooting for you guys because I think if this is executed right and it really works, I do think the potential here is so exciting. It reminds me, we just came out with our episode with Matt Sanders and what he's doing with Ticketmaster. It feels again like those baby steps that aren't going to change anything necessarily instantly overnight, but which you can look back at and say, oh wow, that was a really critical moment in shaping the future. And so anyways, I'm excited.
One of the things I mentioned earlier in this podcast about how I've had meetings with a lot of the studios and kind of a good read on where they're at. And a lot of them are sort of what I'll call just say layer one. It's collectibles, it's licensing, the storytelling aspect they're not quite getting their heads around. What I'm hoping with Lollipop is as we kind of can unveil more about what it is, all of a sudden it's going to start like, oh, it's going to click. It can be ticketing. It can be loyalty. It can be a token, gated access. It's the things that all of us who are kind of deep in Web3 already know, but it's just hard to communicate what these technologies are capable of and then find a use case to apply them to. So I'm hoping this opens a lot of doors in that way.
Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about, Web3 Sense. A Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. How is the convos with, like, have you been able to tell any of the studios, or maybe since these two press releases, like, have you had any conversations with them specifically about what y'all are doing here, or not yet?
After the first press release, I can't say about the second because it's coming out the day that we're recording this.
Yeah, it hasn't actually come out yet. It's coming out the day this episode is airing.
But I can say based on the first press release, we had 2 of the major studios in Hollywood reach out to us and ask for updates.
Wow. That's interesting. That's very interesting.
So, yeah,
cool.
Not necessarily to partner, but just people we've been talking to along the way that we've hinted about
More
this.
Curious.
And they're like, oh, wait a minute, we want to hear more.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, great. Well, we will obviously keep people posted on this product. I think this is a great, like, illustrative example of the kind of stuff you're talking about that we can be tracking in real time, month over month, that you're obviously heavily involved in. Let's dive into what I'll call our main story tonight.
I was going to say one other thing before your main story tonight. Darn you. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. I was going to say we could probably get David Ayer on the podcast in a future episode too.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. I do have to say, I feel like Fast and the Furious is like the classic example of like how franchise has like ruined Hollywood. It's like, yeah, no, don't make anything unique. Make Fast and the Furious 23, you know? I do feel like that's become the seminal example of like, my God, can we get something new? But it was a great franchise.
Well, that's a great segue into development. There's your
main story tonight. Which is development, and talking about how the blockchain can really affect and improve or be an add-on to the development process in Hollywood. We started getting at this, of course, at the top of the show. Your theory around this. Take us to this, John. Maybe I think it's like, how does development currently work? What are the flaws? What's not working within the development process right now? And why do you see NFTs as a somewhat of a solve for some of these problems?
Yeah. So let's talk about how it should work and not how it is working. And that is, if we let's rewind about 2005, somewhere in that time frame. The entertainment industry shifted, at least the Hollywood entertainment industry shifted to this franchise model. And
We've talked about this a couple times.
Yeah,
interesting example of an architatural innovation that Bob Iger really left. You were very, in the heart of. You were the first head of digital franchise. Whatever.
Head of franchise, live action franchise for
Disney. Got it.
And so the way it was supposed to work, it's really built around the idea of brand portfolio management, which is you have some brands that are cash cows, just generating tons of money. These are your Star Warses of the world, your Marvels of the world. You have some that are in a position where, okay, they're mature, they've kind of had their day, they need a reimagining or a reinvention, and those are your Pirates of the Caribbeans of the world, probably your Harry Potters of the world right now, and need to kind of go back for a rethink before they come back around again. And then the third part of this, which is the beginning, is you need a pipeline of new IP coming into the system. And that's critical because you can't rely on your cash cows and your mature properties forever. The problem that Hollywood had is because of risk aversion and the cost associated, they did number 1 and 2. They did number 2 and 3, those steps, but they stopped investing in number 1. And so
like the new
IP. Yeah, exactly. They stopped really investing and really taking risks on new IP, and they kept trying to go mine old IP. Like, how many times can you go back to the Pink Panther? How many times can you go
back to Fast and the Furious?
Yeah, how many times can you go back to the Fast and the Furious? How many times can you go back to Rocky? Or they've overmined those. And so now where would they normally source a big new IP? Well, a lot of that would come from the publishing world, or from first look deals with big writers and producers. The problem is they've pretty much wiped the slate clean of anything in the library that they can mine. That's been picked over. The publishing world, until someone writes the next Harry Potter, the publishing world has been completely picked over of those big IPs. So there's really not a lot there. And
is that, sorry, not to cut you off, but is that just because the amount of content we needed exploded so much during streaming that the rate of which they were actually bringing on new IP, but the rate at which you need new IP is just radically changed?
Yeah, exactly. There was a lot more IP needed with all of the streaming series. And so and every one of the studios has talent, book finders to scour the industries to find those for them.
This is also what's so interesting about the Hello Sunshine model, right? Which is Reese Witherspoon's production company, is because I feel like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about any of this, but my sense, their flywheel is that Reese is obviously very famous, beloved celebrity, etc. She reads very quickly, right? She read all these books. And so she kind of got this lock on female authors writing stories about female-centric characters. Like, she kind of gets her pick of any of those stories will come through Hello Sunshine first to be developed, which is an amazing business model to have. And I feel like they've really cornered that market. Yeah,
and for a lot of female writers, like, you want to go to Reese or
the stories they put out are good.
Yeah, exactly. Because they have good taste. And they care and know how to take care of their partners, the authors in this case. So they are a desired place to take a project. The problem is, how many projects can Hello Sunshine sign on at any one time? A couple dozen at most, if probably much less than that even. So there's just so much bandwidth. And the problem is, I'm sure there's a lot of writers probably hearing like, what the hell? There's so much great written IP that can't get picked up. And I know there's all that IP, but for what very narrow, specific focus the studios have, they're having a hard time finding that. And what they really want isn't an amazing story that, say, Carly wrote today and could become that great hit. They want that project that's already sold 100 million books worldwide because it comes with a guaranteed fan base. And then we're going to transition now to where Web3 can help. They want guarantees. They want surety because the risk and the costs are just so extreme to even develop a title to say, hey, we're going to acquire the rights that cost money. We're going to assign internal staff to it that costs money. We're going to assign a writer who we're going to hire for X number of dollars per week to write a treatment or logline a script based on that. You're talking millions of dollars within the first year to do that. And they don't want to do that if it's just Carly's good idea. They would prefer to do that if it's J.K. Rowling's good idea.
Yeah.
So that's where you get this challenge of like writers need to have a stature and and a following in a community to really help with that kind of building that trust and conviction in the studio partners. And the studios need to see that the IP has fans that they can mine and leverage for not only obviously ticket sales later on, but also information about what works, what doesn't work, what was, the creative aspects of the title. And so thinking about how Web3 can help on the studio perspective, now this isn't going to replace the traditional process. I will never be the person that says Hollywood is dead. This is going to destroy Hollywood systems. No, but it's going to become an additive element, and it's going to require some reorganization, architectural innovation around accomplishing this. But my argument is that the studios need to establish first look deals with major Web3 creators. Superplastic and Amazon is a good example, or with studio partners like Feature, or with individual creators, let's say Micah Johnson, to help bring them IP. Now, is it going to be Harry Potter? We've sold 200 million books worth of content? No. But is it, hey, we've got a passionate community of 50,000 followers who are diehard, love this, and can tell you everything about it and will be your brand advocates if you take it to the next step? Absolutely. And so it's not quite the same, but it's better than what else is out there. And it's a way to start testing and checking IP. The really cool part, which I'm hoping to see some opportunities develop around, is we can just go out and look for these established IPs that are out there, like say in Akutars. But how about we develop our own? Let's develop a new IP that's just say Lionsgate in partnership with Feature, and say, let's develop a new IP and go test it. We'll launch it as a Web3 project. We'll manage it. But the idea is that it's already got a place in our development pipeline to eventually become a show or a film. That is the model that I see evolving that I'm really excited about.
I think it's really interesting, and what you're getting at is it's this like lower cost way. It's sort of what social media did, right? Which is, the pipeline of send out different tweets, see what gets traction, and then you turn that into a newsletter, right? Or throw out little snippets on TikTok, see what goes well, and then make a longer YouTube video based on what's getting traction there. It's like that. It's like throw out these IPs, see what's getting traction, and then go and make it further once you've gotten that signal. I have a couple questions or areas I almost want to push back on. So the first thing that comes up for me is, we spoke last time when we talked about Disney, that Disney has more IP than they know what to do with. They have so many characters. Is Disney an exception to this because they just have so much IP they're sitting on? We said Disney probably wouldn't acquire an outside IP because they already have so much. Help me reconcile that with what you're describing now. Yeah,
so the answer is Disney could do this. They probably are the ones that least need it because they have so much IP on the shelf, but Sony would be in the same position, Universal as well. The reason they want to do this is they need fresh new IP. That all of the IP that's on the shelf, while they can go back and try to mine that to see what might work, those have already been largely looked over. So this opportunity is to bring up new IP from scratch, completely fresh, rather than having to reinvent an older IP.
So when you're saying, when we talked last time and you're like, Disney probably wouldn't acquire an Akutars, for example, it's because they should leverage this to internally develop their own IP. They're unlikely to go pick up somebody else's, but they could still use this process to internally do it.
Exactly. Okay. And what I could see them doing, though, is like a partnership with Micah Johnson saying, hey, we want to work with you to develop other projects besides Akutars. Or I could see them working with a Yuga to do something like that, or any of like the kind of the big storytelling projects that have been successful. I could see them saying, hey, work with us to help us develop new IP, and we'll test it in this area.
My other question, I've got a couple questions, but it's all under this umbrella of like, is it too early for this? And there's two components to this, which is A, I don't think it's useful to necessarily just get feedback from the community of people who are currently interested in NFTs, right? If you tried to go test this, the people who are going to pay attention are the people who are listening to this podcast right now. And we are a very specific, weird group that probably you're getting like a very skewed perspective on what people are interested in relative to the broader public, because we're already the weirdos because we're here right now. So A, that would be a concern that I want to hear your response to, because I'm like, is it just too early to do this? Are they going to be able to get the attention of a broad enough sector of the public to know if they're getting real signal on something? And the corollary to this is, when I've talked to NFT projects, a lot of what I've heard, and I've said this on the podcast before, is they have meetings with these studios And the studios are like, this is interesting. I hear you have 100,000 followers on Twitter and 50,000 people in your Discord, and that's kind of compelling, and we're compelled. How many people own these NFTs? And they're like 4,000. And then that's sort of where the conversation stops. And the studio is like, okay, well, pat you on your head and on your way. Is this too early also because to the same point, like there just aren't enough numbers here to actually be compelling for a studio?
I don't think it's too soon, and here's why. It's not necessarily that you're using the Web3 community as your only signal with this. So if we go back to if I had Bob's ear, that might become a recurring segment on this.
If I had Bob Iger's ear.
Here's what I would tell him. And it would be, bring in either a partner, someone outside to be your first look partner, development partner in this, or have an internal person who's kind of the in-house expert in the development staff. Work with these projects, identify them. But it doesn't mean you're going to take it straight to, based on 4,000 people or 10,000 people, take it straight to a TV show. What it means is, hey, we're going to take it to a children's publishing project, and we're going to test it there. And we'll see if there's pickup in more mainstream media through children's publishing, like going back to what David Horvath was saying. Or we're going to test it in webisodes, or we're going to test it in our website as like special bonus episodes. It doesn't have to be straight from NFT project to film. It can be tested in other media. And that's going to give you the signals to have, okay, should it move along in a process?
Interesting. So, and let's go back to this idea of like these companies who are developing this internally. There's, and you're certainly among the people who I think have been critical, gently, kindly critical of a lot of how studios have approached NFTs, because it has often felt quite cash grabby. And it's, again, mining these old familiar IPs, your Lord of the Rings, whatever. That's become like the seminal example, I feel like. But with any number of these Batman, like they drop these NFTs based on other IP. It feels like it's a merch drop that's cash grabby and exploitative. Like when I hear you say, okay, incubate new IP and start with NFTs, to me these should be like free. Like let's do free drops on 3 different IPs we're doing and see which get pickup and which people get excited about. And now, great, you've got signal and on like which set of IP is most interesting, because you see of 3 free ones like what actually got pickup. Is that how you would see it playing out?
Free or very inexpensive, $20, let's say. That's why layer two scaling is so important, because these aren't going to be your $5,000, 3 ETH apes. These are going to be $20. It's a test. You get to be a part of a community, even free, and it's really about being a part of that community and participating in the project and giving that feedback and seeing how stories develop and content develops. There's even a way to tie in some of the community storytelling type projects into this, where, okay, let's see how we develop some stories around it, and then we'll see, okay, we like this, we're getting good signal, we're going to take it to a publishing project, or we're going to take it to do some inexpensive webisodes and see if that gives us any more information. So I would see, definitely it's free, low cost. It's just really trying to get as much people to get their eyeballs on it and just start getting signals out of it. But it can be done so much faster, so much cheaper than hiring dozens of very expensive name writers for years, for a decade, to rework an idea before you know it's good enough to take to that next step.
It's interesting because I'm always trying to go to the contrarian case to it, or like what's the devil's advocate lane here. And one of the places I went to is, well, why don't they just do that now on social media? But even as I'm thinking that question, because it doesn't feel right. Like it would be weird. First of all, who really follows Disney on social media? I guess there's probably truly millions of people who follow Disney on social media, but you get who's following Universal on social media. Again, I'm sure literally millions of people do, but whatever. But then what? They're just posting different characters all the time that don't actually have to do with their IP. Like that really isn't a model for this. That's not really a channel for this.
No, this would be very specific. It's not going to be, hey, Universal fans following our general Twitter that, hey, we got this character. It's going to be more through a specialty channel. And then you're going to be getting that signal and trying to take it to the next step.
Yeah, that's interesting. Though I imagine the goal here, at least to my mind, is that channel, it's coming back to what I was saying earlier, like you want that channel ultimately to be a little bit more diversely populated, right? And I don't mean that in the typical way we're using the term diversity, that there's some of that, right? It's also just in the sense of again, it's not a bunch of people. The people who are self-selecting into Web3 are already kind of a weird specific crowd, and there's a certain amount of groupthink you're getting from that. So it's just even having more of the general movie-going populace a part of that pipeline. Like, I imagine that's got to be the goal, and I'm curious if you have thoughts as to how we get there.
Yeah, what kind of tying into that, this idea of more diversity in the voices that we're hearing and participating. A little bit further down the road, when we've gone a little bit more mainstream as an industry, one of the things that I've heard one of the big 5 studios say outright is the big opportunity they see is diversity and finding diverse
from
voices.
Web3. Have they met?
Well,
have they hung out in Web3?
Not necessarily from Web3, but finding artists and storytellers
Yes.
in places like my favorite go-to example, Des Moines, Iowa, or in Lagos, Nigeria, or in
and I think we talked
Shanghai.
about that deal, right? Which was this kind of historic deal for Disney, that Disney actually did a deal with
That's
a Nigerian studio that is developing a product. Because Disney usually doesn't do these outside deals, as you're describing. Like, it's usually always internally incubated, and they have a partnership, or you can speak probably more eloquently to what exactly it is, but there's a Nigerian animation studio that they're working with, which was really interesting.
Yeah. The fine details are escaping me right now, but it was announced at D23 last year. It's a Nigerian studio, kind of small studio, that developed this IP that will be developed into, I believe, a Disney Plus streaming show. And it's Disney's first, a couple notables. It's the first time Disney brought an outside studio onto their stage at D23. It is the first time they've done a deal with a studio in Africa to bring a show to kind of the general Disney Plus streaming service. So it's very notable for those. It's the thing is that, going back to the studio conversation I had, is what that studio said is that despite their best efforts at trying to bring diverse voices, new writers, new artists, it hasn't worked. They're frustrated by it. They want to be successful in that area. They want to find these voices that, for whatever reason, it's just not breaking through kind of that Hollywood system. And what they're hoping with, as these communities develop, is that they can find those voices in places like Des Moines or Lagos and say, hey, here's a chance to get seen by a development exec directly at the studio. You get to bypass all of this Hollywood crud that keeps you from our development people. And here's a way to do it. So here's a way to get your story here. And they don't even have to be into NFTs or Web3. This could be just an artist working in their dorm room, or it can be a writer working in a coffee shop. But the community of Web3 can get it over to them through these projects. And that's one of the exciting parts.
I get this. It's funny because we've talked about this a number of times, and the devil's advocate contrarian in me or whatever is like, really? Is this like, for all the reasons for all the hesitations I just brought up, I'm like, is this really how it's going to work? We've got this weird niche Web3 world, and this is where they're going to develop the future Harry Potter. But like, when we really flesh it out, I get what you're saying. Like, there is something that feels uniquely suited about NFTs to do this, where I can't actually, because that's always the question, right? Like, well, couldn't you do this in the Web 2 world? And sometimes for some of the use cases of Web 3, the answer is yeah, you could hack this together in a Web 2 way. This, I'm like, I don't really know what the channel is outside of this that feels like it would be as good for this as NFTs are. Building the community, creating a community around characters, creating communities around IP. There's really no other channel where that is happening like it's happening right here.
Yeah, I mean, I think like around fan clubs, right? We certainly felt familiar with fan clubs. And other than Lucasfilm and Star Wars, no studio really has a fan club function. There's no one managing the Fast and the Furious franchise fan club over at Universal. Disney has the D23, but that's at the corporate Mickey Mouse corporate level fanship, not specific IP. We try to do it with Pirates a little bit, but there's just no budget. How do we budget for a fan club or manage that when we've got years between projects?
Johnny Depp married Amber Heard. A lot of things went to shit there.
Sometime talent let you down. But for Lucasfilm, they're the only ones that invested that. And it was a small team, like 2 to 3 people. Maybe they ramped up during a big release, but they were managing their fan club. But one of the things that this allows for is the creation of many fan clubs. And the tools are now in place. The technologies will enable that. What I would say if I had the ear of like the head of development at a Disney, not just Bob, I would say it to the head of development at Disney or a Lucasfilm or at a Universal, is to say, what do you have to lose? You're talking one person, maybe an outside partnership that doesn't even necessarily have to cost you money. It's just a conversation. What do you have to lose? What are you doing better right now today that says you don't need to try? I can't think of any studio or any project, any media company in Hollywood that is doing so great right now that they can just say, we don't need to think about that. Even Netflix is probably the strongest of all of them right now. Can't say, oh, we don't need to worry about that. We're doing so great otherwise. Like, what do you have to lose? Try it.
Yeah. Anybody who's reading headlines knows that none of these studios are doing so great. They don't need to think out of the box, right? Like,
yeah. Do you have so many future Star Warses lined up that you can't make them? Like,
yeah.
I think everyone's cupboards are bare. So what do you have to lose? Try something different. But the problem is Hollywood doesn't like to break the way it's always worked.
No, it's the innovator's dilemma, right? Nobody likes to break the way they've always worked in many ways. So to wrap this up, I mean, you're saying if I had the ear of these folks, you have been talking to studios and some people at a I think a reasonably high level. Mm-hmm. Have you put this to folks in the Hollywood system?
I have, not quite that rudely, but I have. And what I can say is this, that there are in every one of the studios very interested ears listening, but no one is yet to take the leap. And someone will be the first to take that leap of, yes, we are going to put together that first look arrangement. Well, you could say Amazon with Superplastic might be the first, but we're going to put together that first look arrangement, or we're going to put that one person in on the development staff to oversee this and start building those inroads and building that infrastructure to try to find alternative sources of IP out of these places. And I think once one does and gets a little bit of traction, then the rest will all just fall into
place. Oh, yeah. John, thank you so much as always. So informative, so interesting. And I look forward to continuing the series and taking on production next.
Yeah, next step is Bucket 2 production. Awesome. Thanks for having me again.
Always subscribe to OPJ, our Substack, because we'll have another piece from John. We now, like to do a newsletter that is a nice companion piece to these episodes. So, if you hate the sound of our voices and yet are still here somehow, you can go subscribe and read all about everything that John is talking about here. And with that, have a great week.
Yeah, GM.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.